Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us at No Kid Hungry's webinar, Finding Success with Community Eligibility and Breakfast After the Bell. My name is Emily Gartenberg, and I'm here with my colleague, Summer Kriegshauser, who will be leading off the webinar. But before we start, I just wanted to give a couple of quick housekeeping announcements. We will have a Q&A after the bulk of the webinar has finished, so please go ahead and type any questions you may have into the questions box, and we'll try and get to those questions when we have time. We also are able to answer any chats you might have, so if you have any trouble with audio or visual, you should all be seeing slides. Please just let me know, and I'd be happy to answer any of those questions for you. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Summer.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you all for joining today. I'm so excited that you'll be joining us for Finding Success with Community Eligibility and Breakfast After the Bell. We have a great hour ahead of you today. We'll start off by introducing everyone. This includes myself and the panelists. I will start out by talking just a little bit about No Kid Hungry. Hopefully you all know who we are, but if you don't, I just want to level set so everyone's familiar with the work that we do. I'm also going to kick us off with just some breakfast basics. So when we talk about breakfast after the bell and use different terms, that we ensure that everyone's on the same page, and same for community eligibility. But I will not be taking up the bulk of the hour. This is for our speakers who will be talking about their own success stories of using breakfast after the bell with the community eligibility provision. And then, like Emily said, we will have questions at the end. So feel free to send those in the chat box as you think of those, and we will get to those after all of the panelists have spoken. So before we really begin, I'd love to know who is attending today and what your familiarity with breakfast after the bell and community eligibility are. So we have a poll. The poll reads, what subject matter are you already familiar with? Are you already familiar with the community eligibility provision? Are you already familiar with breakfast after the bell? This includes those breakfast after the bell models as breakfast in the classroom, grab and go, and second chance. Are you an expert at both, or are you not familiar with either of those topics? Please go ahead and mark which one you are. And we will give it another 15 seconds or so, but this will help us determine what subject matter you are familiar with and really help me when I'm level setting about breakfast after the bell and the community eligibility provision. So let's see, it looks like, and we'll close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. So the majority of you are familiar with breakfast after the bell. Okay, very helpful. The next most familiar, you're familiar with both. 30% say you're familiar with both. That's fantastic. 23% are familiar with the community eligibility provision, and 9% are not familiar with either. Okay, this is super helpful. This webinar has so much great information. I think everyone's going to benefit, but thank you for taking the poll, and we will be back into the webinar now. So I'd like to do introductions now. We have 4 fantastic people on the webinar, myself being one of them. I'm Summer Kriegshauser. I'm a senior program manager here at No Kid Hungry. I focus on breakfast expansion and using those breakfast after the bell models to increase access to school breakfast so that more hungry kids get fed. We also have Hitesh Haria that will be speaking about his experience as a school business official. He's currently in the Pittsburgh Unified School District in Pittsburgh, California. We also have Kathy Alexander, who is in Newport News Public School, and she will be talking about her experience running breakfast after the bell and community eligibility. And then we also have Summer Purvis, who is in Livingston Parish, Louisiana, who will also be sharing her experiences and her successes with breakfast after the bell and the community eligibility provision. So we will be hearing from them later on in the webinar. Okay, I just want to do some level setting again about No Kid Hungry. No Kid Hungry is a campaign by Share Our Strength. So essentially, Share Our Strength is the parent company, and No Kid Hungry is an initiative to end childhood hunger within that space. So what do we do at No Kid Hungry? We increase access to the federal meals program. We focus on school breakfast, after school meals, and summer meals. We feel like these programs have great infrastructure in place for the most part, and we don't want to reinvent the wheel. So we really work on supporting these programs and helping folks get these programs in either schools or community organizations. All right, with that, let's dive into breakfast after the bell. So the importance of breakfast, there are many things that we know why breakfast is a big deal. One, we've seen that breakfast affects test scores. We've seen that students exhibit better attendance when they have breakfast, and all of that together equals a higher rate, or more like students will be more likely to graduate. So this is a really big deal. We say that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and this is certainly why. However, there are various barriers to eating school breakfast in the traditional cafeteria way, and we want to highlight those because then we can see why breakfast after the bell and the community eligibility provision support access to breakfast more so than sometimes traditional cafeteria breakfast. The logistics of traditional cafeteria breakfast can be a challenge. For many reasons. I have these listed here, but the cafeteria might not be convenient for students, or breakfast is served too early in the morning. And then there's also the stigma of cafeteria breakfast is for low-income students, and we see time and time again that students would rather skip breakfast rather than deal with the stigma of having it in the cafeteria before the school day starts. Then there's also the financial barrier that some students might not be able to afford breakfast. So as we move along in this webinar, you'll be able to see how breakfast after the bell and the community eligibility provision addresses these barriers really nicely. So let's quickly look at traditional cafeteria breakfast versus breakfast after the bell. So the barriers that I showed briefly here before, they are beautifully addressed with the 3 alternative breakfast models. We call them breakfast after the bell because really you're just moving when breakfast is served and the location breakfast is served. And the models are breakfast in the classroom, grab and go, and second chance breakfast. And hopefully you're all familiar with those. I'm going to quickly go over the definitions so that way everybody's on the same page in terms of what I mean by these terms. Breakfast in the classroom is breakfast that is served after the bell has rung and it is eaten in the classroom. So I listed out the 4 steps of how this actually happens. It starts in the cafeteria. The breakfast is then taken to the classroom. Students pick up their breakfast, and then when breakfast period is over, usually 10 to 15 minutes, and this is a part of the school day, mind you, so students aren't just eating, they're doing other things in the classroom. And the teacher probably has activities planned to support breakfast in the classroom and academic learning at the same time. Then once that's done, all of that breakfast equipment is taken back to the cafeteria. Grab and go is where breakfast is served from 1 or more central locations, usually a breakfast cart, or it could be a quick cafeteria line in the cafeteria if the cafeteria is conveniently located for students. But really, students grab the breakfast on their way to class. Again, breakfast is offered after the official start of the school day. This is very important. A lot of times folks think grab and go means that you just offer breakfast to the tardy students. When we say grab and go, we really mean breakfast is offered to all students after the start of the school day. And so these carts with breakfast may be available up to 10 minutes after the school bell has rung. So that's very important to increase access to school breakfast. So as you can see, there is a computer on slide number 3. This means there's a point of sale system, which is different than breakfast in the classroom. This is how grab and go tallies the number of students that have eaten. And then slide number 4 is just a reminder that students have to deposit their trash somewhere, whether it's in the classroom or in the hallway, but we love to see students being a part of this. And then second chance breakfast, this is where breakfast is offered usually between first or second period or during a mid-morning break. We see this offered mostly through grab and go. So the same thing I described as grab and go earlier with a cart or a quick cafeteria line, or we see schools open up their cafeteria for 10 to 15 minutes and allow students to eat that way. This is a wonderful model for high school students who just aren't hungry first thing in the morning. And so it scoops up those kids and offers them breakfast really when their hunger starts to come on, which is mid-morning. And I also wanted to highlight the breakfast after the bell participation rates. So as you can see, the percentages on the left correlate to the breakfast after the bell definitions that I have in the middle of the slide. And keep in mind, these are participation rates for the free and reduced cohort. This is not total eligible students. This is the breakfast participation rate of the free and reduced population. And if you are interested in the analysis, I have a little line at the bottom of the screen that shows the states that we pulled the data from to get this information. Okay, so let's do a little bit of level setting with the community eligibility provision, and then we'll hand it over to our panelists. So CEP, the Community Eligibility Provision, this is a way essentially to offer universal breakfast to students. And you can offer lunch as well, but really it's for high need schools, so schools with a high free and reduced eligibility, and it uses direct certification. So this eliminates all of those household applications that you would have with regular counting and claiming. So it does reduce the administrative burden, and using the direct certification, SNAP is a data set example, and all states are required to use SNAP, but there are many other data sets that, that states can use. But a school will get, or a district will get, an ISP, which is Identified Student Percentage. And this is the number of students that are certified for free meals without the use of household applications. So districts must have an ISP of at least 40% to qualify. And if we look at how much that is for free and reduced, that's pretty high free and reduced, because again, this is only for those free eligible students. So that's really all I'm going to say about CEP, because our panelists are going to talk about it a little bit more, but I want to highlight some of the great resources that we have at No Kid Hungry. One in particular is called Strategies for Finding Success with CEP, and I'm going to actually show you what that looks like. This is a very new resource. We just put this out in the past couple of weeks. This is to help schools and districts make the most of their CEP. And so these are a list of best practices that we collected from across the country, talking to school nutrition directors all over the place on how they make the most of their CEP. And so there are great best practices, and I'm scrolling down this resource. As you can see, there's several things that you can try out. One is how to increase your ISP. Such as through data matching or using different data sets in addition to that SNAP data set, and other ways to manage your program costs. So I highly recommend you taking a look at this resource if you are looking to maximize your CEP. Okay, so let's go back to the presentation. Fantastic. So really what I'm starting to show you, and what you will see throughout the rest of the webinar, is that the most successful combination to achieve maximum breakfast participation results, really, and to add more revenue to your school nutrition budget, is to combine the community eligibility provision and have breakfast after the bell. All right. So I'm going to hand it over to Hitesh to start out, and he will share his success with Breakfast After the Bell and CEP from a school business official perspective. Hitesh, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Summer. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hitesh Haria, and I'm here. I'm really excited today because I get to talk about my two favorite things in the world, food and money. So let's go right ahead and advance to the next slide. I'm here to talk about Breakfast After the Bell and CEP. And as you can see, I've got a couple of logos. I've worked all the way from the East Coast, starting in Washington, D.C. public schools. And right now I'm in sunny California. But I've worked my way through the country from the East Coast to the West Coast and have a lot of experience on implementing Breakfast After the Bell and CEP at various different school districts. And I'd love to share that information with you so you can go ahead and implement at your schools. Next page, please. You have all seen this before with regards to the importance of breakfast. And I take the example of a car. A car can't move without fuel. And so our kids cannot learn if they don't have fuel to start off with. And so we start with that in terms of breakfast. So there's a whole range of, benefits for making sure that kids have access to breakfast. And you've seen them and discussed them before. Next page, please. I want to highlight one specific school district where, this was in 2015 or 14, I think, in that period of time in Memphis, Tennessee, when I was there. We had an enrollment. It was a large school district, about 97,000 kids. We started breakfast after the bell in about 20 schools. And what was amazing is we saw participation go up, right up to 98% for most of those schools for our kids there. And that was absolutely phenomenal. From a money perspective, we made sure that model was sustainable. And so in 1 year, we actually grew our revenue by about $1 million. And the following year, we introduced a supper program, and we increased our revenue by about $11 million a year between breakfast and supper. That means, winning, which if you turn over to your next slide, it's like winning for our kids. And these are the people that can help make all of that possible. So, from a school perspective, we're always looking at the board and the superintendent helping from a governance perspective. But the people that you're going to be dealing with on an ongoing basis is going to be your chief business officer, your chief operating officer, the site staff. And when I say site staff, I'm talking about the principal, the custodial staff, the food services staff, teachers. And we always need to keep students at the center, or as I prefer saying it, at the heart of what it is that we're doing, because ultimately we're here to focus on making sure that they get fed and they have the fuel to be able to learn. So those are the key stakeholders. So as you're talking about implementing programs such as CEP, breakfast after the bell, those are the key stakeholders you need to be talking to. If you turn to the next page, there's some more resources, and Summer gave you some links to them and showed you directly how you can find them. But essentially, School Nutrition Association, NEA, USDA, and partners such as No Kid Hungry, FRAC, other foundations or grants that may be available as well. But there are a plethora of resources out there to make this successful in your school district. Next page, please. So how do you influence breakfast after the bell? And I look at sustainability in the sense that once you start something, you want to tweak it for success, but it's an ongoing thing. There's a lot of money that's generated from food service, and it can help in different ways. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that benefiting on the next page. You're not trailblazing here. You're not doing this for the first time. A lot of schools have implemented this, tweak their programs for success. And so what we can do is learn better from those people. More participation means more kids getting fed, being fueled up to learn, and kids get to school on time to have their breakfast or eat with their friends and that sort of stuff. And that helps out from a financial perspective. So if you turn over to the next page, so what do I mean it helps out from a financial perspective? The first thing is generating dollars. So as I said, I love talking about food, I love talking about money. And on the right-hand side, you'll see a stack. It's not a stack of pancakes, but a nice stack of $100 bills, right? So most school districts generate their revenue for the general fund by attendance. It's called average daily attendance. And so when kids come in to eat breakfast, they come into school on time at least. So even if it's after the bell, it's like, hey, let me get there by bell time so I ensure that, hey, I can enjoy a breakfast with my friends and that sort of stuff. But that helps the general fund because we're collecting money from attendance. And any money that increases the general fund, school districts can utilize that for any purpose. It's unrestricted money. They can balance their budgets. They can put more money into the classroom, that sort of stuff. So it helps the general fund, but it also helps the food service fund. So if your school district is operating in the red, in the sense that there's money taken out from the general fund to provide some relief in food services, you don't have to do that anymore because you can build up the fund balance with additional revenue. I've also worked in places where we've increased that fund balance to such an extent that we could improve our menu offerings and our food quality and create more warm and welcoming environments for our kids. So they wanted to come in and eat as well. Next page. So we usually talk about nuggets sometimes at breakfast. I wanted to provide you with some golden nuggets here. You can see food and money and value are what I love talking about. So, from what I've learned from doing this in other school districts, start small. There's lots of success out there. Build a coalition. We gave you a list of who are the stakeholders that you need to engage in making this a success. Keep kids at the heart of what it is that you're doing. Solve the adult issues. It might be some cleaning stuff, or hey, how do we need to tweak this? We can make it happen. Other school districts have, but we want to make sure that kids are fed. It's the most important meal of the day, and make it easy, automatic, and fun. Press that easy button. Let's get kids fed. So now I'm going to move over from breakfast after the bell to more of a financial perspective from a community eligibility perspective. So I gave you a definition here, but basically CEP means that it's provided by USDA, and you can serve breakfast and lunch at no charge to all the students in that school. And so most school districts have seen an increase in meal participation when they've got the community eligibility provision. Just something from a guideline and regulation perspective. Now is the time to start planning how you do CEP for next year. And traditionally, by June, those applications need to be in. So when you start off the next school year, you are ready to implement CEP. Next page, please. So the benefits of CEP is that all students eat breakfast for lunch. That's breakfast and lunch, and that's completely for free. There's no meal eligibility determination required. So that means no free and reduced meal application forms. There is something called an income verification form. It's very easy in other school districts, including mine, have done that. But every year there's no free and reduced meal application forms. Because there's no cash, you don't need to have cash registers. All you need to do is meal counting and figure how that works. So there's no more cash handling, there's no meal payments and all that sort of stuff. There's no meal charges, so there's no alternative meals where that may need to be provided. And it brings equity into the meal service in totality. When you move on to the next page, how do you qualify as a school district for CEP? So let's take the example of ABC school. They have about 206 students there, and we utilize the directly certified numbers because, as I said, the free and reduced meal applications don't need to count anymore. So in this example, there's about 137 students there. So the percentage of free and reduced is about 66.5%. How do schools qualify for? If you have more than 40% that are directly certified, that gives you eligibility into utilizing CEP. Now, there's a sweet spot in all of this to be able to make sure that financially you're balanced when you feed everyone for free. And that sweet spot is anywhere between 40% directly certified right up to 62.5% is what I calculated, where I'll show you just now where you get all your money for every kid that's eaten in that school district for free. But you need to evaluate that can work for that specific school. You turn over to the next page. What's lovely about the CEP provision is that you don't only have to do this for each school, but if you have a group of schools where this could help, you can group them as a single free and reduced eligibility. So it's not just one specific school, but you can group a couple of schools together, and that might help make your numbers look better. So talking about numbers, I'd like to go through and explain how this works on the next slide. CEP funding, the most important number in CEP funding is what they call a multiplier, which is a 1.6, right? So in an example where we have about 55.71% people that were free and reduced, if you multiply that by 1.6, it tells you the free rate percentage is 89.1%. So that's the type of reimbursement we're going to get from the USDA at 89.1% of those kids that eat for free will get the free rate. The paid rate is where, for 10.9% of the students that eat will get the fully paid rate for those kids. So as I said, this is very beneficial because you can see that you're not just dealing with 55.71%. The advantage is that the USDA gives you this multiplier of 1.6%. So your total free and reduced of free rate is 89.1%. Now I broke this down in the next slide with how this may look. So if you turn over to the next slide, you'll see we have some numbers. So right at the top, we have CEP revenue, and that shows that with the CEP revenue that we just calculated on the prior page, our total revenue for CEP for that specific school with breakfast and lunches served would be about $75,000. But then if you look at the revenue without the CEP, depending on with exactly the same participation, we'd get about $82,000. And someone would say, but hold on here, I make more revenue without CEP than I do with CEP. Yes, you are correct. But what's wonderful about CEP, because you're feeding all those kids for free in their entire school, participation automatically goes up. So if you look at the numbers right at the last bit there, with just a 10% increase in revenue, and I've seen anywhere between 15 to at least 35% increase in revenues just for breakfast, those numbers go up. And I'm sorry, you can't see the bottom of that slide, but the bottom number there is actually in the slide itself. It's $83,425, which is more money than you would make from a school without implementing CEP. And then you multiply that by the 10 months of the school year, and by school, you will see that, when you combine your breakfast after the bell with your CEP, there's a whole bunch of money that can come back into the school district. So if you turn on to the next page, you will see my contact information. If there's any way that I can help you or help you walk through how you would, work with the COO or the superintendent, or, with regards to breakfast after the bell, or from a financial perspective for CEP, happy to help. And I'm so glad and excited that I was able to share some information with you today.
Oh, thank you so much, Hitesh. That was great information. And before I send out the slides after the PowerPoint, I will adjust the slide so that way that last line with the financials will be visible. So thank you for that. And now we are going to turn it over to Summer Purvis. Summer, whenever you're ready.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Summer Purvis with Livingston Parish Public Schools. Just to kind of give you a little overview of our district, we have about 26,000 students, 39 cafeterias. We serve at 44 sites. We have a variety of breakfast after the bell programs, breakfast in the classroom, second chance, and breakfast to go. So in total, we have 29 out of our 44 sites that do breakfast after the bell. We are CEP with an ISP of 93.34%. Next slide. And so, as you can see, our path to CEP was a little different than most. When school started in August of 2016, we had less than 30% of our students who actually were direct certified. But only 6 days into the school year, our district suffered some devastating flooding. And as a result of the large number of families who qualified for emergency SNAP benefits, we were able to qualify for CEP, and that's how we got the ISP locked in at 93.34%. So, CEP wasn't something that we were, originally looking at for our district, but given the circumstances, it was something that was a great value to our district. And so at the time, it was really hard to find anything positive about the flood, but our district's ability to enroll in the Community Eligibility Provision was definitely a blessing for several reasons. Regardless of our students or families' financial situation prior to the flood, we had 90% of the homes and businesses had flooded. So students were displaced, businesses were closed, jobs were lost. So it was a great financial resource for the people in our community. Also, the increase in revenue that was able to be made for reimbursement rates provided our department the financial independence from general fund, and then those resources were able to be allocated to other areas of our district. And the third is, it provided us opportunities for new programs, to explore new programs such as Breakfast After the Bell. And then you can see on the next slide, one of the things that when we got ready to implement Breakfast After the Bell that we knew was going to be crucial was stakeholder buy-in. And, that was from a variety of different stakeholders, but we knew that buy-in was essential for not only the implementation and the startup of the Breakfast After the Bell program, but also for the longevity of the program. And so, given the structure of our district, we really viewed the principal as the key stakeholder that we needed to get on board. Our district very much follows a site-based management system when it goes to the schools. So we knew in order to get any support from central office and our school board members, we were going to have that principal on board with the program for their school. And so we also felt that it was crucial that because the principal already had a rapport with their teachers and their staff members, that, it was important to have that principal to be able to help us introduce that to other stakeholders that they already had a relationship with. When we met with our stakeholders, we had a tentative plan, and that plan included some logistics, menus, staffing, but we simply wanted it to be a tentative plan for the purpose. We wanted to provide enough details about our idea of Breakfast After the Bell to our stakeholders to make them feel comfortable, because it was an unknown situation, but we wanted it to be flexible enough so that they could help us to incorporate their ideas and help us to further evolve that initiative for the implementation into their school. We thought that was important for everyone to have a voice, because that really helped to ensure the success, because nobody wants something that they're a part of or wants their idea to fail. So we wanted to make sure that everyone that was involved, from the principal, the custodial staff, the teachers, the cafeteria staff, we wanted all of those site level employees to really have a voice in how they felt that the program should look, so that they had, some stake in making sure that the program was implemented successfully. And when we spoke to the stakeholders, we knew what our reasons for wanting the program was: to increase participation, to increase revenue. And so we knew what our why was. But in order to gain that support from our stakeholders, we really had to focus on and look at what was important to them, because that's what we had to focus on when we met them. How was this program going to help them achieve their goals? So from an education standpoint, increased test scores, decreases in tardiness, students paying attention longer in class, shorter lines in the cafeteria in the mornings, being able to get those kids processed faster. We knew that all of those things were going to be very important to the stakeholders that we would be talking with. And so, we had to not only understand why we wanted to do the program and why we felt that the program was important, but also to understand what the benefits to them would be. And so that way we could help to really evolve the program, not only for our benefit, but for everybody's benefit, because we knew that was going to be what really made the program successful for the students. And after, so we have 44 sites, and when we initially pitched this idea to the principals, we had two principals that responded, an elementary and a junior high principal. And we started the implementation of those, and then we knew in order for the program to go any further that we really needed them to share their success. And so we did like a media day during breakfast at one of the sites, and we invited other principals in the district, our board members, teachers, our central office administrators, and we actually brought them to a site during breakfast so that they could see what breakfast in the classroom at that particular site looked like. We allowed them free reign to speak to students and teachers and administrators and students, and that way they could really see the impact of the breakfast after the bell at that particular school and get an idea for what they felt it would look like at their school. And of course, as we've continued on with breakfast after the bell, you have to revisit your successes, and follow-up is essential. So once we got that initial buy-in, we've had to make sure that we, continue to maintain those relationships. I always say what gets monitored gets done. So just like we monitor meals per labor hour and cost, we also have to make sure that we're monitoring how the program is working at each of the schools so that if there are situations that arise, we can deal with those before they become problems. Because there are a lot of stakeholders involved, and so to make sure that no one is feeling overwhelmed, whether that be your staff or the teachers, we have felt that was important to make sure that you go back and you monitor on a regular basis at those sites. As far as what breakfast after the bell has looked like in Livingston Parish, the next slide. So what we've seen is for increase in participation, 80 to 90% for elementary and junior high students, 45 to 60 for breakfast in the classroom, second chance breakfast, 60 to 65% participation for that particular model. Our district was also named for the 2017-18 school year and 18-19 school year. We had the highest increase in district in breakfast participation across the state. And this year we were actually awarded the Fuel Up to Play 60 NFL Hometown Grant. The financial impact alone for breakfast in the classroom, the additional meals that we have served through Breakfast After the Bell initiatives and with being CEP has created an additional $900,000 a year in revenue for our district. And so that's really been a blessing to us. And then past the actual numbers portion on the next slide. Participation in dollars are tangible measures of success. But it's really the intangible measures that provide our department with the greatest sense of accomplishment when it comes to breakfast after the bell. Breakfast after the bell models such as breakfast in the classroom allow students to eat together in their classrooms and interact like families that are sitting around a dinner table, which in today's society, families are busy, and that's not a privilege that many students are afforded. So sharing meals in a class setting allows students to build those lasting relationships. And it also, has allowed them to build a different type of relationship with their teachers and a different rapport with them as well. Another benefit that we've seen is from moving the food service staff out of the cafeteria, so in a grab-and-go type model where they have a kiosk, you move those serving lines away, which sometimes kind of acts as a barrier. And we've even had managers state that it was the first time they actually felt like they were part of the school faculty because they're not confined to that cafeteria. They're actually moved out into the hallways or the communal areas in a school. They're getting to interact with the staff and with the students on a daily basis, and so it makes them feel more part of that that atmosphere. And so in all, breakfast after the bell has not only increased in participation, but it's also helped us to change the culture and the perception of school meals and what school meals are about. We want students to think about school meals like they are the heart of the school, just like your kitchen is the heart of your home a lot of times. And so by using these different types of models, we've really been able to change that perception with students in the way that they think about and view school meals within their school day. And also breakfast after the bell has allowed us to go on the next slide another step further and really expand our program through some collaboration efforts. So with breakfast after the bell, we have been able to also get into some after-school meal programs. We've partnered with the library and a local nonprofit to develop an after-school program called Feeding Young Minds, where we feed at the library branches, all 5 library branches in our parish. We do work with our local Chamber of Commerce, and therefore we get to work with some local businesses. We work with our district STEAM community outreach project, where we go into actual neighborhoods and we do nutrition education, not only for students, but for parents, and promote our program. And so through Breakfast After the Bell and CEP, those programs have allowed us to really get out of the cafeterias and not only be able to share what we do on a school level, but also on a district and a community level as well. So those programs, CEP and Breakfast After the Bell, have really made an impact on our district and on our department in a lot of positive ways. So we are grateful for both of those programs and the success that we've been able to see thus far.
Right. All right. Thank you so much, Summer. That was wonderful. I'm going to now pass it over to Kathy. Kathy, whenever you're ready.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to be here. I'm Kathy Alexander with Newport News Public Schools in Virginia, and I'm going to talk about Breakfast After the Bell and CEP. Next slide, please. We have, just to tell you a little bit about our demographics, we have 43 schools, enrollment of 28,000 students. This year was the first year that we went district-wide CEP. We have a 47.79 ISP district-wide and a 76% reimbursement rate. Next slide, please. So I just want to talk a little bit about how we got started. So the first year that community eligibility came about, I'll have to say I was a little bit nervous. So we waited and saw what our friends were doing. And then in 2016, we added 7 schools that gave us 100% claiming percentage. That's a no-brainer, easy. We knew we were going to get 100% at the free rate. What is interesting, I'm going to go through all of this, but what's interesting to note about this is that when I talk to other districts, they say, well, they really didn't see, a big increase in participation when they started going. Well, you're not probably going to if you're at 100% claiming, because a lot of those students were already very high free and reduced schools and were already eating for free or reduced. So we didn't see a huge increase. The following year, we decided to add 13 more schools, which gave us a total of 20. We had a 53% ISP and 85% claiming percentage. I was a little bit nervous about that, going from 100% to 85. But like my other counterparts, it was financially lucrative. We started to pull in kids that didn't eat before because so we started to increase our participation. In 2018, we added 6 more schools that gave us a claiming percentage of 83%. And then the following year, we added 13 more schools. So you can see our ISP was going up even though we were adding more schools that were lower free and reduced. That gave us an 84% claiming percentage. The following year, this year, we only had 6 schools that were not on. And so we decided to go ahead and take the plunge, and that did give us the 76%. So you can see that it did go down 8 percentage points. So we were a little bit nervous about that. But what we've seen with going district-wide, which was interesting, we had middle schools, just for an example, that have been CEP for the last 2 years. But because we went district-wide, we did get a lot of media coverage. We've increased in those schools by about 150 lunches a day and breakfast. So just because they were free before or eating at no charge before doesn't mean that students or even parents realized it, even though, we communicated a lot with them. We sent letters home. We posted it on our website. We parent linked them to let them know. Open houses. Sometimes the message just doesn't always get through. Next slide, please. So along with my other counterparts, we also did alternative breakfast models at the same time. So when we started CEP, we were already provision 2 breakfast in all of our elementary schools. So for those not familiar with provision 2, it's based on a percentage. So you claim some students based on free, some based on reduced, and some based on paid. There's a formula that you use to do a spread. Well, when we switched to CEP, the funding formula is so much better. And at the same time we were going provision 2 and CEP, we started doing breakfast in the classroom. So we started breakfast in the classroom in our elementary schools about 10 years ago. And probably 4 years ago, we've wrapped up. So all of our elementary schools are breakfast in the classroom. All of our middle schools started 2 years ago. They are grab and go. And again, if you're CEP, you don't need a computerized system if they're going to the classrooms. You can just count them. So we have clickers, and we have many of our middle schools and elementary schools serving more breakfast than lunch. For our elementary program, we do the traditional classroom feeding, where each teacher has a cooler with their breakfast and they hand them out to the students. We doubled our breakfast participation in almost all schools when we started doing alternative, which you need a little bit more labor, but not a lot. So financially with CEP, that's huge. And we also increased our revenue. Last year and the year before, we increased our revenue by almost $1 million. And at the same time, we did add some supper programs, so I know that helped as well. But I also think it's easier to get into your supper feeding, your more summer feeding, if your schools are feeding all the time. If students and families know that school is where they're going to get their meals, then it just makes sense that they would be eating supper as well, summer with us as well. Next slide, please. So benefits of CEP is that it would, of course, increase participation. Staff and parents love you. You can always get good press when you're feeding their kids for free. And less applications means more time for other tasks, no verification, and it's very easy to implement alternative breakfast models when you are doing CEP, because they don't have to have a computerized system. We were doing some grab and go in middle schools before we did CEP, and having to purchase tablets and that kind of thing for students to put their number in was just cumbersome. And so it just makes it easier. And of course, your increased revenue really helps and is able to put money into other things. Like we were able to do some cafeteria redesigns, upgrade some of our equipment, do some great things with that. So if you can do it, even at a low ISP of 47%, it's definitely worth it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathy. What great presentations. I want to thank our panelists for just all the great work you've been doing and great experiences to share with everyone on the line. So we have a couple of questions that have come in, and I'm going to read them off, and then I'm just going to ask the panelists, because you are all the experts in doing the work, so I think that makes sense just to pass these questions along to you. So the first question I have is from Trudy. Trudy asks, when you increase meal participation, you would increase revenue, but also cost. And she says that was not factored into the last slide by the first presenter. Is it still financially beneficial? So I think Trudy's asking the startup costs of breakfast after the bell, or to provide CEP, being that you're providing breakfast at no cost to all students. Is there an actual startup cost that maybe weighs or takes away from the process and the final financial the revenue? Panelists, would you like to answer?
Absolutely. So from a revenue perspective, you're absolutely right. for every bit of revenue, there's some expense that comes through. So usually you would have your startup costs as well as your ongoing food costs. And if your participation is blowing right through the roof, you may even have some increased labor costs. What I've found is that the revenue far than covers all of those expenses. You may even have revenue left over to be able to contribute or increase the fund balance to create better food options and that kind of stuff. In terms of startup costs, what I found, Summer's provided some resources up front. There's a whole bunch of foundations out there and grant givers that actually help with some of the startup costs. Getting the bags and all that kind of stuff for breakfast after the bell. Yes, there is a startup cost, but the startup cost is so small, and there's resources available to help you offset that right off the bat. I hope that helps.
Great, thanks, Hitesh. Kathy or Summer, do you want to comment on that?
This is Summer.
Go ahead.
This is Summer. I will say that, with CEP, I will say that has opened the door for us for a lot of grant opportunities. And there are a lot of organizations who are looking to expand breakfast after the bell. No Kid Hungry, Partners for Breakfast in the Classroom, Dairy Max, Fuel It to Play 60. A lot of those organizations have grants that are available to offset some of the costs for equipment that can be used for the startup of breakfast after the bell.
Great. Kathy, did you want to add anything as well?
I was just going to reiterate the same thing, that we were able to get breakfast carts and things like that as grant opportunities.
Great. Next question, and this is from Andrew. Andrew asks, how do you handle student allergies with grab and go and not checking student allergies like you would in the cafeteria?
This is Kathy. I can answer that. We do grab and go in the middle school, so they might have a different perspective. So most of those kids know. What we do is we print a list of allergies. And if we know a child, let's say, has an allergy to something and we know we're serving it that way, that day we will put it in a separate bag for that child and have it on the line. For elementary students, we print out a list of the allergies. The teachers are actually checking the child's name off a roster. And so we have a list of all the students with their allergies. And again, if it's a student that cannot have something, we put it in a special bag with their name on it.
Thanks, Kathy. Next question. This is from Brooke. Brooke asks, how do you handle offer versus served with breakfast in the classroom?
This is Summer. So for us, we for breakfast in the classroom, we don't do direct delivery. We have kiosks that are set up even for breakfast in the classroom that the students would come by and they get their items and then they go to their class with their items. We do bag, typically it's the entree and a breakfast juice in a bag, so that we know that if the student receives that bag, that is a reimbursable meal. And then on the breakfast cart also there's typically another fruit option and then the milk that they could pick up if they want to. So, but we do know that if the student gets that bag, that's a countable, reimbursable meal. So that just makes it easy for counting and claiming. But, and we use, share pans and things like that to avoid, excess food waste. But, that way the students are still passing by or going through a line, and so they are able to pick up the items that they want.
This is Kathy. They actually go through a line. So even if they're in the classroom, we don't bag anything. Everything is just out, and the student will come by in the classroom, like by the teacher, and the teacher monitors whether they get a reimbursable meal. In the middle and high schools, we have somebody monitoring the line. So everything is on the kiosk, nothing is bagged, and they do pick up a bag and they can put things in their bag, and we just make sure the cashier makes sure that, I'm calling it cashier, but we are just clicking them, make sure that they get a reimbursable meal.
Great. Okay, next question, and this is from Ladislaw. Ladislaw's asking for best practices in terms of counting each reimbursable meal in the classroom, for breakfast in the classroom.
This is Kathy. For us, when we deliver to the classroom, we print off a roster through our computer system. Even though we can just count heads, we prefer to do the roster. And so the teacher will actually, we deliver the meals, or the custodian, somebody will take the box, and the teacher will check off the students. And then at the end of the day, the rosters go back to the cafeteria for claiming procedures.
Great. Okay, next question, and this is from Brooke. Brooke asks, if you only have to count students, she's saying with a clicker, for example, how do you address the issue of kids coming through the line multiple times and receiving multiple meals?
This is Kathy. It's my understanding that you have to be able to prove that they can't come through the line more than once. So for lunch, we don't just click. They actually do put their numbers in. But for breakfast, because they're going from kiosk to classroom, we are able to do that. And that is something that our state has approved. Might be different in different states, I'm not sure. But same with classroom feeding, because the teacher knows who the students are and who's getting the breakfast, we are able to count them that way.
So this is Summer, and just to add to that, we just set up logistics to where once that student passes that point of service line, that they cannot come back through. So they're leaving that point and going to their class, and that so the way that we set up our lines, you know, sometimes is dictated by the way or the flow of the students going to and from class. And we also at lunch, they have to put their numbers in, because it's harder to control in that type of environment. So at lunch, they put their numbers in so we know exactly. But for breakfast, we just set our lines up for logistically, and don't allow students to come past that point so that we know that they can't get a second meal.
Great. And this will be the last question. This is from Brandon. Brandon asks, he says, you mentioned grants being available for breakfast in the classroom. What are some of these agencies or grants specifically? So panelists, can you share where you've gotten some of your grants from?
For us, we got some stuff from No Kid Hungry when I implemented this in Vallejo last year, and then from the Walton Foundation for Memphis, Tennessee.
We've got some, this is Kathy, from No Kid Hungry and from the Dairy Council.
This is Summer. We've gotten some from Partners for Breakfast in the Classroom through the Walmart Foundation. We've gotten through No Kid Hungry, the Dairy Council, Dairy Max. All of those have been great funders to breakfast after the bell program.
Wonderful. Okay, and with that, we are at time. I want to thank our panelists. Thank you, Hitesh, Kathy, and Summer. The information you provided was fantastic. And we will be sending out these webinar slides after, in a few days, really. But thank you all for attending, and have a great rest of your day.